So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Natalia, for the introduction and for inviting me to this initiative. I align on the three verticals that you promote because I'm an immigrant myself. I'm from Venezuela and living now in Portugal. I am a professor at some postgraduate programs, and we also have our YouTube channel where I kind of teach AI. So it's not formal education, that part of my life, but it's also part of educational work. I'm also a student, of course, and we not just because I enroll in courses, programs, but also because I enjoy learning, and I believe we are in an era where we are reimagining the learning experience and the channels on which we learn and how we learn. So let me just share here the screen. Let's see, let me know if you can see it. I guess you can see it now, right? Perfect. So when you invited me, Natalia, was in the doubt if I was going to make a more technical session about how to implement stuff with AI agents, prompting, etc., or if it was more useful for the community to take this opportunity to discuss and create a more open debate about the impact of AI, etc. So I arrived to the conclusion that at this point it's maybe better to keep up with my purpose, which is demystifying AI across different fields, and that means opening the debate about what it can do, what it cannot do, where we are, how can we be part of this journey. Just for those of you guys that do not know me, so who am I? I'm a father, a husband, and that's what defines me on every day that I exist. That is full time, and then part time. I am a co-founder and entrepreneur of Nearly AI, entrepreneur and CEO. So I'm a founder and CEO of Nearly AI. And on a day-to-day basis, what I do is I am an AI advisor. So I help companies embrace AI. We help them identify where and how they can apply AI. As I mentioned, we have a very active role on education around AI. So what can AI do, what it can do, etc. We have our YouTube channel. The name is the same as our company, so Nearly AI. You have the 100K subscribers. Award from YouTube, and early in April we took part with Microsoft on a Guinness World Record to establish the largest learning session on AI. So most users learning AI in 24 hours. So for me, I mean, teaching is learning twice, right? So that's the importance. And then I was trying to think about my. So when I was preparing this session, I was trying to think about how are we learning today and how I am personally learning today. And by learning, I don't necessarily mean memorizing a book, but actually, like, how do I explore topics? So whenever I need to do a certain task, for example, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I do a lot of team leading, management, marketing, etc. So I have to touch a lot of fields that I'm not an expert into, and that I know nothing about those fields. So learning is like a continuous for me. And I try to think, like, in the last few weeks, I have been trying to actively checking how do I learn and how is the experience of learning for me as a human. And I guess we can all agree that there are like three major sources of learning or of information, or sources of information. Then how we interact with this information is different, but there are like three main sources, right? One is books. Like, books have been the most ancient, if not the word of mouth, but let's say books have been a very well established way of learning. Then we got the internet, and with the internet we got a democratization of information, but still with some nuances around reliability, around reaching the actual relevant information. And now we got ChatGPT, right? And ChatGPT, I mean, by ChatGPT, I actually mean any AI model, which is not just access to information, but because it's not necessarily knowledge, factual knowledge, but it's an easy way to discover things, at least. And that is how I mostly use it. So I still use these three sources. I still use books, mostly when I need trustworthiness. So mostly when I need to have factual information that is reliable and that I don't need to be double checking the reliability on a day-to-day basis. I still use Google or search engines to get the most up-to-date information. So what is happening with Israel-Iran war, I won't learn that on ChatGPT or on a book, right? Because that happened 2 hours ago. So I need to go to the live source of information. But if I need to get a more exploratory path towards learning a concept where I need to be more, or where I want to be more curious and where I want to have the will around how I'm going to learn this topic, what things are more interesting to me, I go to ChatGPT. So ChatGPT or any AI. So maybe AI do not bring us quality of the data. Maybe it doesn't bring us the most up-to-date data, but it's truly an engaging experience to discover concepts. And it's truly a way of us defining what are our priorities around learning and how can we adjust our priorities and our preferences on our learning path. And I think that's changing the whole way of how we are structuring education, right? And throughout this journey of teaching AI at events, at our channel, in podcasts or lives such as this one, I have been talking with students, with professionals, with professors, with people in institutions, and I guess from the professors' tribe, there is like this general feeling that basically students are cheating with AI, right? They just deliver the homework, and then everybody has the same outcome. All of them are almost perfect. I won't say perfect because AI hallucinates a lot, but it's kind of difficult nowadays to know if a person did something with AI or not. And actually, on my classes, I incentivize people to use AI, and it's a more challenging approach because then I need to be more conscious on what I ask, so I can assess students. But I cannot blame them for using AI because it's a tool and it's a very efficient tool that they have nowadays. I need to be more creative on the type of things that I think, such that even with AI, they have a more immersive and more constructive learning experience. And even for me to assess people when I hire them nowadays is super difficult because I can, I do a technical test. I don't know if they did it with AI or if they did it themselves. But in the end of the day, I don't really care because I care more about their capacity to deliver than whether or not they use AI. And the issue, especially on learning, is that we care more about the score than about the learning process as students, especially on our early lives, on our teens. So when we are teenagers, we care more about the final scores rather than the actual learning capacity that we are developing. And that is why kids cheat on exams, because they need to grant to get a score. And I have seen that AI is exacerbating this pattern. So I see my nephews, all of them using AI they take a photo of their homework, and then they just literally copy paste or handwrite the answer without even thinking what's there, if it makes sense or not. But I don't think we can blame students. I believe this is a symptom that the system of how we learn, how we teach, do not longer work, and AI gives us this possibility of redesigning our educational system. It was created, I don't know, in the 19th century, maybe 200 years ago, during the Industrial Revolution, and it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed that much for 200 years, and now we have a pressing need to actually rethink education. So what I want to do, I don't know how much time do I have. I put here my cell phone with a clock, but now it's blocked. Okay. If I start talking too much, just tell me, Kelvin, we are running out of time, and I will just keep
talking. No, continue, please. Just
okay. I like to talk a lot, and then I never stop. So you just write me on the chat and say, "Can you stop?" Okay. So what I want to do with you now is to reimagine education. So if we didn't have schools today, how would we teach today? Okay, that is our approach. So before we start on education, let's try to define what is AI. Because if we want to say what is the impact of AI in education, we better agree on what is AI. So I want you guys to write on the chat, what do you think AI is in 1 or 2 words, okay? Without being overly extensive. So can you write on the, let me just move here, this screen, because so I can see 2 things at the same time. So how would you define AI? You know, if I got you guys, are you there? Machine-based intelligence. Okay. Who else? Let's see. Small helper with periodical hallucinations. You know, I have been working in AI for over 15 years, something like that. So there is a common pattern, right? When you work on something that is generative intelligence for machines and large amounts of data, right? So when now you are talking a tool that simplifies tasks through the use of internet and programming, any tool that uses artificial intelligence to produce answers. Okay, so when you work on something that is not like medicine and law and these type of things, there is a certain pattern, which is your mother will always ask you, what do you do, kid? Right? Like, I don't know if you guys work on not very, let's say, traditional careers. I work on AI, and my mother every day asks me, what do you do for, like, how do you put food on the table, right? And I come with these type of responses, like machine-based intelligence model, right? It basically teach machines to think as a human through something that is called artificial neural networks that imitate the human brain. And I come like with all of these cryptical expressions. And by the end of the day, she just tells me like, okay, kid, as long as you are happy, I'm happy, right? Which is not what you want to hear when you work on the sexiest field on the 21st century, right? Uh, so I actually made an effort to facilitate, to simplify the concept of AI such that everybody can understand it. And for me, AI is just predictions. So the only thing AI is doing is making predictions. Okay. And then of course you will ask me like, what is a prediction, right? And a prediction is nothing like, it's nothing more than new data. It's like an educated guess of what will be a reasonable response, or what will be the reasonable piece of missing information that we didn't have access to, and now we do. So AI is just making educated guesses, and what we can do with that additional data is basically making better decisions. So the only thing that we are doing with AI is trying to improve our decision making. Okay, that's as simple as that. But basically, if you're working with a technology that is automating or optimizing decisions, it requires a type of mindset shift from us as a human, which is we need to stop making decisions and we need to start deciding on how we make decisions. And I bring you this example. I wear a black t-shirt, blue jeans, and brown shoes every day of my life because one day I said I won't decide anymore what type of clothes I wear. I will delegate that decision on the past. So I will decide once and then I will keep that decision forever, right? Because that releases mental, like brain space, mental bandwidth for more value added tasks. And I did the same, for example, with breakfast. I eat eggs, avocado, and a toast every day of my life. And I've been eating that for, I don't know, 3 years maybe. I've been wearing the same clothes for 3 years, not the same actual shirt, but the same style of shirt. Okay, so I'm kind of a clean person. Okay, let's say. But basically, it requires AI requires this type of mindset. Like, how do I delegate decisions, whether it is on a machine, whether it is on another person, and whether it is on the past, and how can I identify opportunities to free my brain from repetitive tasks, from tasks that are very uncertain and that bring anxiety to my day-to-day life, that are very complex and drain my brain and that do not add that much value, right? And that is a mental process we need to do when we are embracing AI. regardless of what field, on which field we are doing it, right? So if we think about examples in education, at least more thinking now in terms of teachers and professors, we have a lot of this type of tasks, right? Tasks that are very repetitive, that involve uncertainty or complex decisions, and that can be driven by data, right? For example, a very time-consuming task that every professor has to make almost every week, let's say, is defining exams or tests. And it's very complex because you need to make sure that they are balanced, so that it's not super ultra difficult, but it's not all either like the easiest test on your life, and that have a high coverage. So whether if the student passes the test, they know that concept as a whole, not a specific part of that concept, but as a whole. So you can use AI, for example, to assess your test. You create a test with this condition, then you evaluate, like, is this very well balanced in terms of difficulties, in terms of coverage, passing it, for example, the learning materials that you share with your students, etc. You can also use it to evaluate student responses. And of course, then we get into ethical concerns of whether we should do it or not because of the biases that AI has or not. But we can all agree that this is a process that drains mental capacity from professors, that they should be coaching students instead of just reading responses, and AIs can easily solve this type of tasks. We can use it to, for example, identify knowledge gaps on the class, to recognize that maybe it was not the fault of this student, but maybe it was our fault that we didn't teach that concept properly. We can use it to create learning materials. So we can use it on a whole bunch of tasks, because as professors, we do a lot of decision making on our journey from preparing the educational material to delivering it, to assessing, to coaching, etc. So I want to assess the impact of AI in education in 3 levels, and these 3 levels come from this from a book that I will share now with you. I think I have it here. Let me check. I think I have a copy here. I think I have a slide with it. And the reason I want to put the impact of AI in education in these 3 levels is because there is a law that is called the Amara's law, which says that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short term, in the short run, and to underestimate the impact of a technology in the long term. So we believe AI will kill professors next week. That won't happen. We are overestimating the impact of AI in the short term. But for sure, the profession of teaching won't look at all as it looks today in the long term, and in an order of magnitude that we cannot even understand today. So we don't really capture what will be the true impact of AI in 50, 60, 70 years. We cannot imagine that. And once the disruption has passed, it's pretty easy to understand that will be the effect. But for example, if you tell me today, Kelvin, what will be the impact of the steam engine in 50 years, when the steam engine was created? So think before electricity, think before the steam engine, think before the car, the automotive industry. Try to clear your mind from all the concepts that you know today. Once you see the first steam engine, it's pretty easy to overestimate that the next year you will have flying machines, right? Or something like that, and that you will go to the moon. And that won't happen in 1 year. But it was very difficult to understand that the steam engine will help, will lead us to the trains, that then will lead us to a lot of tunnels that will connect the world, and that they will make mass creation of products, etc. So as Daniel says, it's a copy mechanism. That's right. So we exacerbate the impact on the short term because we are afraid and we want to make sure we are ready, but we don't really understand what it will cost in the long-term future. So there is this book, Power and Prediction, that I truly recommend to anyone trying to understand how AI will change your industry, regardless of what your industry is. And they present this 3-layer system. It's actually reverse. So point integration is the lowest level, then workflow and system, but I put it like this because I will go in this order. And what we see today is what in this book they call point applications. point implementations of a technology, which is we take a simple task or a simple tool that we use to solve a certain task, and we replace it by another tool. In this case, AI. For example, we give feedback to students, right, on their exams. Now we are replacing the human intervention and putting there a machine that does exactly the same process. But we are not re-engineering the process, and we are not making the process 10x better. We are just changing a small part that is a direct replacement of what we had before with what we have now. And these two on the top are tools that we have developed for some learning management system. One was to give instant feedback on exercises. For example, a student is learning a foreign language, they are learning adjectives. So we have to make a conversation, let's say a chatbot with a student that assesses them, evaluates how they are using adjectives and provides them feedback on this. So a very point-wise application, which is giving feedback. Okay, we are not changing the overall experience of learning. We are not changing the content. We are not changing the intrinsic value we give to education. We are just changing the human feedback by a machine feedback in the short term. We also implemented, for example, for another learning management platform, a recommender system of modules and lessons based on what the student already learned, knowledge gaps, what failed, etc. And we do see the impact, but it's just a short-term impact of these technologies, right? We can do the same exercise around professors facing. So how can we replace specific tasks that professors do on a daily basis that can be done better, faster, with higher productivity, lower cost, etc., using AI? For example, identifying plagiarism, right? Like if you can drop all the tests from all the students into a machine, and you can tell them who cheated here, who copied from who was the original source of information, right? Or for example, we can generate individualized tests. Like one issue with sharing is because everybody has to solve the same task. So as soon as one person solves the task, everybody solves the task if they communicate. But if all the tasks are different, there is no benefit from cheating, right? Because you won't really save any work, right? And this is again putting the ball on the side of the students are doing something wrong and we should prevent it. I'm not sure they are doing something wrong. They are just being efficient. Let's try to put the ball on how can AI help the professor improve themselves. For example, it can help the professor by identifying patterns on mistakes, misconceptions, and knowledge gaps. Like all your students fail around, I don't know, fractions or equations. So there is a knowledge gap there. That is your obligation your responsibility to fill in. Maybe it's not on the program, but if they are failing here, there is a knowledge gap that we should tackle. Or for example, producing and auditing learning materials. And I do this with our videos on a day-to-day basis. So we are constantly auditing our videos before we recording the session, the script, sorry, and we ask an AI model like, these are all the videos that work in our case. These are the ones that didn't work, that didn't have that good performance. What do you think about this video? Will it make sense or not? And I did the same thing with this presentation. So I share all the presentations I did because I have a table with those presentations. Audience where I made the slides, etc., for a community around AI, the impact of AI in education. Give me feedback about it. And I didn't save any work. I actually spent more time preparing this presentation, but I wanted to deliver a better presentation. In the same way that as a professor, we cannot just automate the production of learning materials just because it's faster. We need to make better educational experience. And how can we improve the engagement? How can we improve the outcome of that learning material? But this is the first line of thinking when we think about AI. So I have this very specific task. How can I do it better, faster with AI? But I'm not changing the workflow. So the second degree is let's try to reimagine our workflow as students, as learning. So how is the process of education, and trying to rethink that process. And if we think about it, like the learning process is very pre-formatted, it's not very personalized towards personal goals, towards the personal experience of each person. So it's just something that is like, there is a syllabus, there is a certain type of content that you should master, and there is not much way from deviating from there. And so basically, education is like a book. ChatGPT is like personalization. And now ChatGPT, I mean ChatGPT because it's the concept that everybody understands, but it's actually AI as a whole. So what if we change the workflow? And we know the person needs to master a certain type of concept, but the way they reach that point is adaptive to their experience, to their past knowledge, to their outcomes. And we adjust difficulty and we adjust the concepts such that we don't focus on delivering the content, but on moving the student from point A to point B in the more engaging and successful way. That is rethinking the workflow. It's not education as a set of modules that I need to teach. It's more education as a more exploratory journey with the student. And that is something that AI can bring us. AI, for example, can bring us personal tutors, personal professors, personal coaches to each student with personalized explanations. Because if AI knows what is happening on your daily life, maybe it can give you better analogies than an analogy that a professor will try to make sense out of it, right? So we can make the learning experience more personalized, more individual. Which, if we think about it, we always think about AI as increasing the inequalities and gaps between the wealthy and the unwealthy. But if we think about it, like this type of application will actually close the gaps, because nowadays only people with good resource, with a lot of resources, can afford a personal tutor. With AI, you have basically the best professor in the world in your computer for free, because most of these models are for free. And that is transformational. As long as you have internet and as long as you have a device, it can be a bad device. Actually, it doesn't have to be an expensive device. You can have the top quality education from the best professors in the world, adapted to your experience. And then, of course, we can use AI to such that professors recognize the engagement, recognize which students are struggling, and then they can adjust the way they work on AI. And although this is transformational, especially the second point where we have personal tutors for each student that adjust their routines, that adjust their habits, that motivate them, it's potentially still short for what will mean to have a system level change on education. And I believe here's the real challenge, which is how can we reimagine the educational system from scratch? And what are the difficult questions we need to ask? For example, if I have AI, do I even need tests or not? Exams. Do I even need to make exams, or that will be something from the past? Because if I have an instant feedback loop where I'm exploring with the students certain concepts and knowledge gaps, and I'm doing this continuously, first of all, I already have all the feedback that I need from the student, because it's not like the professor is in the school and then the student is learning at home and they need to have a touch point to exchange the outcome of that process. No, it's like the professor is coupled now with the student, at least the virtual AI professor. So we have an instant feedback loop. So do we even need tests? And if the AI model guarantees that the concepts were actually crafted and were actually adjusted to this student and that there are no learning gaps, maybe there is no purpose on making tests, right? Because we are making the experience, we're designing the experience to be a learning experience, not because we are trying to unilaterally teach something and then we are checking if the other person was engaged or not. And then I asked the second question, which is, do we even need formal programs or not? Like, do we even need to spend 1 year on biology, 1 year learning history, and with these specific concepts and these specific topics, yes or no? Because programs were useful because we try to bring universal education to everyone, which is an amazing thing we achieve on developed countries. But at this point, it's kind of something from the past, right? Like this concept of having a fixed program with a certain set of lessons that somebody needs to make on a specific order, when I have the possibility of having an infinite amount of learning paths with AI, and where the student can decide based on his personal preferences, based on his local opportunities in his community, what he needs to learn. Because the type of things that I needed to learn when I was in Venezuela most likely are not very useful in the Portuguese context, right? So maybe if I was in Venezuela and I already knew that I wanted to come to Portugal, that was not the case, but that could be a case. Maybe I could take that opportunity to adjust my time in school to learn another language. And maybe let's learn Venezuelan history, but in Portuguese. So I solved the two things. So what if we can rethink and abolish formal programs that are fixed on time, fixed on structure, into a more continuous learning loop, where we as a humans are constantly defining and learning new concepts. So the question here is, can we actually make education a continuous with AI? Where there is no starting point and an ending point on education, but where education and learning becomes a daily act of that is embedded into our habits, right? So yes, universal education brought us coverage. So everybody, at least on developed countries, have access to education with varying degrees of quality, with various degrees of companionship from professors. But we have basically solved the problem of coverage. We haven't solved the problem of quality. What if AI can help us have both universal access to education with high quality and with the best professor in the world on my pocket? I believe that's the type of question that we need to ask. And I try to think this on every industry where I try to apply AI, which is, if we had to build a school today, okay, a school system today, like from scratch, without all the existing processes, bureaucracies, concepts around AI. So we need to rethink how is the educational system today, knowing that we have AI. How would you design it? Will it be similar to what you did on the 19th, 20th century, where you had a one-to-many educational system with limited resources, where you had one professor for 40 students, and then the professor had to live nearby the school, and then the program need to be predefined because you cannot manage thousands of professors and teachers distributed across the world, and where professions were actually more predefined. So professions didn't change that much in the past. If we think about it, what about today? So does it make sense to train students 12 years on a predefined program, given that professions are changing on a day-to-day basis? So what could we rethink from the way we approach education? And the way I think about these topics typically is with a business model canvas. So if you know it, this is basically to model any business. AI is mostly affecting this component here, right? The cost structure. Nowadays it's super cheap to deliver decision making, to deliver things like education, right? So if we have education for free, which is something, or close to free, which is something that you can have with AI, how will be the customer relationship? Will you be able to have a personalized professor coupled to you throughout the day and teaching you throughout the day? Will you be able to target new customer segments, for example? Customer segments, and thinking about customer segments as students, for example, somebody on a small village that do not have access to education, but that now you can give them the best education in the world. Could we even rethink the model of education and the model of the business model of education and the revenue streams for education from education? For example, Let's just ask this simple question. Let's say I am a private university, not a public school that has to guarantee a public service, but a private university. Will it make sense to give education for free and charge for the results of that educational experience? In terms of, let's say, I will give you this for free because it basically costs us close to nothing, but then we will have, I don't know, 10% of your first salary after education for a year. Will that make sense? Will that give us access to a new customer segment that didn't have access to education before, but now that it is for free, maybe we can elevate them on that career? And this is the type of things that we cannot even imagine. This is the type of things that we are underestimating today when we think about the impact of AI in education. So professors today have a choice. They need to understand if they will be the person that is taking care of kids while both parents are working, or if they will be life mentors and coaches that help the student throughout their transition, their lives, their learning experience. And we will say that, okay, AI doesn't have this human touch that professors do, so they won't engage students. But evidence is suggesting the opposite. Actually, there are already studies showing that people feel AI doctors are more empathetic than human doctors, and the human doctor was just writing stuff on their keyboards, while the AI robot was actually caring about how the person felt, etc. So we do have a challenge around empathy, especially when we are working on an educational system that is 1 to 40, 1 to 100, 1 to 1,000. It's difficult to have empathy on a system where you are massifying education. But what if we could have one-to-one experience with a closed feedback loop with a lot of information about that journey? Last week, I don't know how I'm on time. Let me just check I think we are good, right? So last week, I went to a school here in the north of Portugal. It was basically a day to showcase your career, your profession, such that every student that wanted to learn that profession could ask you questions. And we had a lot of students, not necessarily students that wanted to learn AI and have a career on AI, but a lot of people worried about what they should study now that AI exists. Like, I want to study medicine. Do you think we will have doctors in 20 years? I want to study, I don't know, mechanical engineering. Will that even exist? And that is the main concern today with the students. And my answer for them, and it will be the same for you as professional, will be the same, which is, and I heard this from David Carvalhan, which is, on any point of disruption, the ones that survive are the ones that are more flexible, more elastic, that have higher plasticity on what they can do. So people, in the case of the dinosaurs versus the small mammals survived because they were less specialized to a certain type of weather. And that is how we should think about education. It's not, especially today, it's not about over specializing on a field that we don't know if it will even exist or not, but how can we embrace new concepts on a faster manner? And how can we adjust our programs to let students transition faster across skills? Because if traditional education was basically showing us how to follow steps and how to execute operation manuals for the industrial era, now we have more creative process. So let's think how education works. Basically, you have training data, which is the educational program, then the student has an abstraction, a model of that concept, and then we have a process of testing if they learn or not, which is actually the same process that the machine does, right? Like, we feed training data, we have an abstraction, and we have an inference and prediction time. So machines are simulating the human brain on one thing, which is giving the right answer to questions. So today we are teaching students to answer questions. I have an exam. That exam has 20 questions, and they need to guess 20 answers. They need to predict 20 answers. So in a world where a machine knows all the answers, there is no purpose on being the one that knows the answer. The actual goal is to know the right questions, right? And that is something we should instill on students today. So I believe the exams on the next 5 years shouldn't be 20 questions, you give me the answer. It should be, here you have an open problem. What will be the right questions to ask in order to solve this problem? And then, given that you have these conflicting answers, how can you decide what is the right answer for this problem? So we need to stop training people to respond, to answer questions, and we need to start training people into having critical thinking, into stop interpolating the exercises they did on the classroom into something that goes beyond that reasoning. For example, we need to stop asking history questions on the history class. We need to start thinking history questions or biology questions on the history class to understand why human acted in a certain way on that period. So more of intersecting concepts and rather than verticalizing the knowledge. So and this is something I ask myself a lot of times because I have 2 kids, which is, what are the top skills that I need to instill in them today that maybe the school is not actually teaching them on the right way? And I always come to this conclusion that if AI knows all the answers to any question, and eventually it will happen, then there are 3 things that we need to understand. First of all, is critical thinking. So if I have 2 responses, does this response make sense or not? And we are not training people to have critical thinking. Otherwise, if you think I'm wrong, just go to social media and see how they don't even people cannot even read. I won't say the headline, but the description. So people are not trained to have critical thinking and second degrees of thinking around a certain concept. Then we are not trained to ask questions. We are trained to give answers. And we can see this in the way people interact with each other, right? Like you have a problem, the other person jumps into answer that question. And we need to start thinking about open questions. Like what is the right question, the fundamental question that we need to answer here? And we need to start teaching students to ask the right questions. And then the final one is judgment, which is very close to critical thinking. But for me, judgment is understanding my goals and putting those goals into data-driven decision making. So into between option A and option B, which one I favor, what are the patterns that define my preference? That for me is judgment. So we live in a technology vortex where basically, for example, some industries live on the outer part of the vortex. For example, manufacturing lives here, right? So as time passes, manufacturing doesn't change much. Same thing for transportation. But if we think about AI lives here, biotechnology lives here. So these are areas that from one year to the other, everything changes. Education was in the outer part of this vortex. Nothing changed for about 200 years. What happened with AI is that it's pushing us all together to the center of the vortex. So everything is changing faster than we are used to operate. So we will need to rethink education and to rethink it relatively fast. Just to wrap up, I don't know if you read Who Moved My Cheese. If you haven't read it, just take the next 20 minutes and you will read it. It's more of a pamphlet than a book. It's very short, but it's very practical in the era of AI. In the book, there are 4 characters. There are 2 mice and there are 2 humans that go every day to a room and eat cheese, right? One of the mice identifies that something is changing, like it smells change, like there is less cheese on this pile of cheese, and starts looking for new opportunities of cheese very fast, even when the change hasn't been actually noticed or observed. The second mouse avoid it for a while, but once it recognizes that there are clear signs of change, then it follows the path of the first mouse and then just goes find new cheese. The 2 humans are a bit different. The first one resisted change for a while. For some years, it said cheese will be back. I will have cheese again in a few years. This is not fair. And as time passed, he adapted and he recognized that there won't be cheese anymore. So he went out there to find new cheese. And the final human just rejected the hypothesis that maybe something changed. Maybe there won't be more cheese. And that the blame was others. So there were others to blame, and he has a right to get cheese. If you think you are one of these mice because you are using AI today, no, you are most likely this guy, because AI has been here for decades. It has been around all tools we use. We have been rejecting that it's going to happen. So the people that are adopting AI today are more like this character, and the people that say it's not fair, we shouldn't use it, it's very dangerous, they should stop it, more likely they are this guy here. And the sad story is that we don't know what happened with this character by the end of the story. So we don't know if he made it or not. And we have seen this with all sorts of businesses across all industries revolutions. If you think about a small store in the street that didn't went digital and that didn't went to the internet, most likely they are not surviving today. Same thing for electricity, same thing for any type of industry. So we are at this point where we need to stop assuming AI won't affect education, where AI won't affect our industry, and we need to start taking action. That's my take for you. So thank you.